Good afternoon. My name's Carolyn Evans. I'm the Vice-Chancellor of Griffith University. First of all, on behalf of all of us, thank you, Ita. That was a wonderful tour de force across so many different areas and such a strong advocacy for the ABC. So it was wonderful. You're a relative newcomer to the ABC, as you said, having spent a lot of your life in the commercial area. What surprised you when you started at the ABC? What did you have to adjust to?
Well, I might have been new in this role, but I'm not new to the ABC because my father worked there for a number of years. So Dad started at the ABC when I started as a cadet, when I started my first job with Sir Frank Packer's company, Consolidated Press. And Dad was there for a number of years, and when he retired, he was the Deputy General Manager, Assistant General Manager. So we grew up with the ABC. It's always been on in our house. We listened to the ABC News at 7 o'clock. If any of us talked, at the dinner table, if any of us talked, we got into trouble. When I say us, me and my three brothers. So I know it quite well. I've known people there. When Dad was there, the ABC used to control all the symphony orchestras in Australia, and ultimately that became one of Dad's responsibilities. So I've been going to the concerts for a very long time. So I really know the organisation very well, and so it seemed like a very natural step after my very long career in the media to take on the role of chair. You sort of think, yes, I think maybe my whole career has been prepping me up for this job. If I'm surprised about anything, it's about the passion of everyone who works there for public broadcasting. I mentioned the Australian people are one of our great strengths. The other is our staff, who are passionate about public broadcasting and are prepared to work for us at a far less cost than they'd be getting if they were working in the commercial media.
Thank you. And just a reminder to people that you can send through your questions through to the iPad or indeed put your hand up from one of the microphones that's travelling around the room. I want to come to the question of trust, which you've talked about in a number of different ways. And of course, the ABC is a very trusted institution. And in reference to the federal police raids, one of the things you said about not just ABC, but journalists more generally is we can be trusted. That probably isn't the view of Australians at the moment. And while surveys certainly show the ABC is trusted, journalism as a profession is not well trusted and not necessarily seen well. Does the journalism profession need to look at itself in terms of how it behaves in the world if it expects the support of the public around issues like greater opportunity to do some things that have been problematic in terms of the
Well, because if you're a journalist, it's usually described as a profession whose duty it is to explain to others what it personally does not understand, but we'll put that aside for one moment. I think on issues of national security, the media can certainly be trusted, and that's the issue that we're talking about. When I raise those AFP raids, it's that. Can we be trusted to protect national security? And I'm saying, yes, we can. So whatever views you might all have about journalism, when it comes to national security, those of us in responsible management positions, we know what to do and we know what not to do. And you cannot cite an example, I don't think, where anybody in media has betrayed Australia or done something that wasn't in the interest of national security. I can't speak for the entire profession. There are always going to be one or two bad eggs wherever we all are. But I think most journalists really strive to do their very best. We go into becoming a journalist because we want to be able to tell people stories and we want to be able to tell people the facts. And I think most of us really try very hard to do that.
Well, follow-up question here that's quite relevant. Somebody's asked, how do we navigate the plethora of what's now called news to actually know the truth? There's a sense that you've got different truths depending on which media outlet you might read.
Watch the ABC, that's really easy. Thank you very much. We look for commercial plugs whenever we can get them because we don't run them.
Just coming back to the AFP raids, how has it affected the ABC and its ability to report truthfully and fairly on real
What it has done is it's made some people that were going to give us stories withdraw. So it really has frightened some whistleblowers. And I'm of the view that that's part of what it was all about, to frighten whistleblowers. But as I've already said when I was speaking, without whistleblowers, there's lots of stories we'd never get to hear. And so I think we do need, when we're calling for media law reform, to allow for better protection for whistleblowers, because they're really crucial. There's always someone who will tell you something and you think, we should investigate that. I mean, I've often been the privy of some sort of news secret from a whistleblower, that where I've been working, we've followed it up. And usually it's true, and without it we can't produce the stories. So I think whistleblowers need better protection.
What other changes would you like to see in government policy to try and allow journalists to do their work and to inform the Australian public as well?
Well, certainly the whistleblowers. There's certainly an understanding of what journalists do, and in some instances a better understanding when they write the kind of stories that have that attracted the attention of the AFB. The Freedom of Information Act is very it's very jam-packed. It needs to be cleared and it's written out a little bit better. And I think those are the main things that we're looking for, and better discussion with the government. We are hopeful. There is a meeting being scheduled this month with the Federal Attorney General, with our Managing Director David Anderson, Michael Miller from News Limited, and Hugh Marks from Nine. So I think that's a very positive step that we've got these three main organisations talking with the Attorney General. Hopefully something will come out of that.
Just shifting topics a little bit, one of the things that you raised briefly was the really important role the ABC has in rural and regional Australia. Would you care to share with us a little bit about your vision for what that might look like in the future?
Well, we long term, our goal is to enlarge our services in the regional areas. We know the stories are there. We're making a concerted effort in our newsroom to try and incorporate more stories from around Australia, so that Australians everywhere feel it's their news, and encourage people to go there. Now, I was in Townsville last week because we had our board meeting up here. We have to have a regional board meeting once a year, so we had 2 days in Townsville for our board meeting. And in both Townsville and Longreach, I understand it, there is a problem in attracting people to come and work in the country. So I'm not sure that the ABC should be leading the push to work in the bush, but it's not. It is quite a common complaint of many areas. You hear it with the medical profession, for instance. A lot of doctors don't want to go to the country. So I do think, as a nation, we need to start looking at how we might encourage people to go and work in the country. I can understand you may not want to stay there forever, but then on the other hand, you might love it so much you will. But the thing is, it could be a place in the business of journalism. The most important thing is to get your foot in the door, and once you've got your foot in the door, then the rest of it is up to you. So when I started as a copy girl all those years ago, which means I ran messages, it was fine because I thought I was on my way. And if I'd had to go somewhere else to do it, I probably would have done it. So I think we need to encourage people to see the benefits of working in the country. Maybe seeing if you're going to like it and you might stay there. Maybe just think, well, that'll be a stepping stone for me on my way to the career. We need to rethink how we talk to people about opportunities in rural Australia.
And will government freezes or cuts make it more difficult for you to continue to provide those sort of quality services in rural and regional Australia?
We are clearly having to make some costs. There was an efficiency review, so we're looking at how we might do this. So the leadership team and the managing director is in the process of drawing up a 5-year plan, which we've seen an initial draft, and the board will see a more almost a finished idea at our next meeting in December, and the plan is for the managing director to announce this in March. And that's where we're looking at what cuts we can make. We're looking at the properties we own. We do own quite a few properties around Australia. Ultimo in Sydney, which is our headquarters, is a massive building, and it's very valuable. And I'm not selling it today. No bids. No bids, thank you. But you do have to look at all of these things and just work out, is there something we might do with the buildings? Or is there anything else we can do? So we're looking at everything we do and asking everyone to look at where we might make some cuts. The challenge will be to continue to deliver what we do. But all I can say to you is that every media organisation I've worked for, and I've worked for Fairfax, I've worked for the Packers, and I've worked for Rupert Murdoch. At some time or another, we've all been subjected to budget cuts. And somehow we manage to live with them, and then you regroup, and you go on again, and with any luck, you get a bit more money. So you just have to show that you can do these things. And everybody gets a budget cut sometimes.
Well, with the topic being women in leadership, we have a couple of questions focusing there too. Start with the ABC. How's the ABC focusing on advancing women in leadership positions?
Pretty well. We don't have a problem with the ABC. We're very inclusive. We're across all of it, and a lot of our senior roles are filled by women. Our staff is more than 50%. There's no problem being a woman at the ABC. After all, the chair's female.
Well, and how have you, over your time, seen a change in the role of women in leadership in your career? It's obviously you wouldn't have given that answer some decades back.
No. Well, when I started work, I didn't even envisage the kind of career I've had, because a career for a woman wasn't even on the radar. And it was only when I was maybe when I was 21, I suddenly thought, maybe I could go further than I think I can go with all of this. So I think it dawned on me that there was a lot of things I could do. And I think that's been the same. I'm a founding member of Chief Executive Women. And when we began in the 80s, we began it because we wanted to be able to network, because there were very few women in any positions of authority, and we felt we needed to be able to network amongst each other and maybe support each other and maybe tell each other where there's a job opportunity. And that's grown and grown and grown because there are so many women now in leadership roles. I still think sometimes you have to encourage women to put their hand up. I think it's very important to understand that we do tend to hold back a little bit. I think it's just the way we're made. But if you employ women, I think you have to understand that about them. And I've often said to women who have worked for me, you don't realise how good you are. And I think it's really important to say that to women sometimes. You don't realise how good you are. And then you say, look what you do, look what you're able to do. Take it and go for it. And I think, I think a lot of women have heard that message. But we're making those inroads into the boardroom. I think it's almost 30% now of top ASX companies are female directors, but there's still a couple of dinosaurs with no women, and you just think, really, in this day and age? I mean, take the job of the ABC. When the first group of candidates were put forward, there was not one woman. There was not one woman there. The search company presented all men candidates, and they were all fine. But I do think a woman should have been there. So there's that. But I think where we want to encourage women is to go for CEO roles. As Chief Executive Officer is where you really have the ability to make the changes, where you can really turn a workplace into a family-friendly one if you want to, for both men and women. You can make the big decisions if you're the CEO. It's fine, it's great being on the board, but it's the CEO role is the one women need to go for.
Yeah, and those C-suite positions are actually often a much more mixed bag than the board positions are. So increasingly you will see at least a couple of women on the board of most of those big companies, but the C-suite is not always.
Well, women are encouraged to work for companies if they see women on boards. So if you're a company with more than one woman on your board, other talented women are attracted to work for you.
Thank you. And you answered the next question that was coming up, which was about the original selection process for the chair, so thank you for that. What ABC program or resource do you recommend for young women who are entering or early in their careers?
The news. I do. The news. I think you've got to be well informed. You've really got to know what's going on in the world. So you have to look at the news. And I'd certainly say, and I'd look at the Australian Financial Review either online or buy it in print form. But you have to know what's happening. And I think you can never have too much knowledge. And if you're looking at the news, and I'm reading the paper and I think, oh, mental health, that's good, I'll take that. Because I chair the Australian Mental Health Prize advisory group in Sydney, and I'm always looking for things. Or I see something about women's advancement, I think, I'll take that. Or I send myself an email, or is it something I'm going to check up? So, it's always a source of information for things that you are doing in your own life. And the more you know, the better you can perform. The more you know, the better employee you are. The more you know, the better the chair you are.
So one of the things that you talked about in your speech was some of the threats around censorship freedom of speech and so forth in Australia. And in fact, even that internationally we're starting to gain a reputation for those limitations. Do you think that Australians are fully aware of how concerning that situation is?
I think they're more concerned than people give them credit for. Absolutely. Because I am well known, people do stop and talk to me. Even when I'm out walking the dog, in the morning early, people will talk to me and they'll tell me about what they think. And I've only been stopped by people who keep saying to me, keep up the fight about freedom of the press. I think there's a lot of support in Australia. I think there's some concern about some of the steps that have been taken. And I think people are looking for some sort of positive action.
And how do you think the Australian people themselves might be able to better support this?
Write a letter to the government or send us an email at the ABC telling us you like what we're doing, one or the other. Just people power. I'm a great believer in people power. I think it's the strongest power we all have. Exercise your voice.
Right, that's our homework for today. So, now, have we got any people in the audience who had their hands up for questions yet? No. This is the one in the front here.
Ms Buttrose, you talked about trust of the Australian people being one of the ABC's biggest assets. But the ABC itself has not been immune to accusations from various political players of its own biases, tendencies towards the left or whatnot. How, as the chairman of the board, do you take steps to ensure the reputational risk from those accusations are addressed?
I discuss it with my fellow directors. I discuss it with the managing director. And I ask them to have a look at whether some of the things that are levelled against us have some accuracy in them. Every complaint about us is investigated. Somebody will do a report. The editorial director will go and ask questions. We don't take anything that's said about us at all lightly. And it's a slow process. It's a slow process changing culture in an organisation as big as the ABC. But we listen and we observe, and we're very passionate about what we do, and we really do try to get it right. And we know everybody's not going to agree with everything we do. That's fine. People never agree with everything anybody does. Even they don't always agree with what Rupert Murdoch does. They don't always agree with what Channel 9 does. And I'm sure they observe the complaints just as closely as we do at the ABC. And then we wait for the next day. See what happens then? I mean, it is a funny story. I did tell the minister this the other night, so I feel I can tell you. But our communications minister is Paul Fletcher, and he was our guest at the Ollie lecture, the Andrew Ollie lecture in Sydney that Peter Fitzsimons gave. And I was telling one of the other people at the table, I said, well, I rang the minister when I was going overseas, and I said, Minister, I'm just letting you know I'm going overseas. I'll be back whenever I was going to be back. And I said, I think everything's fine. I said, but the ABC constantly takes me by surprise. And he said, us too. So when people say, how's the ABC? I say, never a dull moment. And believe me, there is never a dull moment.
But of course you are in a slightly different position to the commercials, in that you have built into your charter the idea that you have to have some degree of political neutrality. If Rupert Murdoch decides he wants to back a horse, he can back a horse. The ABC, it would be entirely inappropriate for that. There have been a lot of studies...
But you could always argue the point.
Yeah.
You could always argue the point. You could argue the point with Rupert and you could argue the point with Kerry Packer. You can.
Some people could.
Rule number one, if you're a senior executive and you're not brave enough to tell the boss the truth, then you shouldn't be a senior executive.
Yeah. And we'll come back to something here. So. But there have been a lot of studies that show that when people are deeply partisan about something, they find it hard to recognise neutrality. So people on either side of a debate, if they see something that an ordinary person would see as neutral, they see it as biased because it doesn't confirm their strongly held views. We seem to be entering into an age that is hyper-partisan. Does that make it harder for the ABC to do its job in that sort of environment?
don't know, it's just par for the course. It's just the way, it's the nature of the beast, really. You just keep going on.
Well, talking about keeping on going on, one of the other questions is you've been a pioneer throughout your career and a role model for a lot of women. So one of the questions here is, how do you maintain your resilience, and what advice would you give to the next generation of women coming through around things like avoiding burnout and maintaining their momentum across their career?
You're only here once. You're only here once. So I just don't think you can afford to miss a moment of it. And while everybody wouldn't probably want to be working like I am, I can't think of any other way to lead my life. You know, for me, the way I live is the way I want to live. So I've always thought I have had a lot of opportunities, many of them unexpected. That's what I find so interesting about my career, that many of them are unexpected, and they can't, like this job is unexpected. When the Prime Minister said he wanted to see me, and I went and saw him in a small room at the Australian of the Year Awards this year, and he made the offer. I mean, it was not even on my mind. It was quite a surprise, to put it mildly. And then you sort of think, yeah, I'd like that. I'd like that. Maybe that's what I've been in training for ever since I began my journalism career. I don't know, but it seems like a very natural fit for me. Writing my first book was a surprise. Hosting Studio 10 was a surprise. There's a heap of them. Becoming Australian of the Year, total surprise. You never imagine it happening to you. And all these things, and I think it's possible for many of us to have these kinds of opportunities. The thing is to recognise them when they come your way, because they're usually unexpected. And because they are unexpected, they do take you by surprise. So you think, oh, maybe not. But I've always thought, yep, I'll take it. And so I think that's part of what makes me. I grew up with three brothers, and they say to me quite seriously, when they're adults, we were all having dinner. Unfortunately, one of my brothers has died, but when he was still alive, we were all having dinner one night, and they said, you know, sis, you should be grateful to us. Your whatever success you've had, you owe it to us. They said, well, brothers, you know. They said, we taught you how to be competitive. We taught you how to speak bloke. And we taught you how to understand the workings of the male mind. Maybe they did, I don't know. But I tell you what, when I think about it, I think the competitive part of it was really quite valid. Because whatever my brothers did, I always thought I could do it too. I never thought that whatever they did, I couldn't do it either. So I think that has actually been very important to me as I've made my way to where I am now. So I would never tell my brothers that, because I'd never hear it. I'd never hear the end of it. But I think I owe the boys. I think I owe the boys a bit of thanks.
Now we have a question from table 10. I can't see where table 10 is.
Good afternoon, Julie Beebe from Tas Networks. Thank you very much for coming today. I know we've all been very thrilled to hear you speak, though I was a little disappointed you didn't mention my favourite ABC program, which is Gardening Australia. So, but
if Gardening Australia could just tell me how to beat the black spot on my roses, I would elevate you way further than that.
But anyway, going to something a bit more business-like, I mean, I'm a director on the board of Tas Networks, and we as a government-owned corporation, clearly we have budgets, we have a lot of constraints, but we still want to broaden what we're doing. So when we look at that budget question, we don't just look at cutting costs, but we look at, well, how can we increase revenue? You made that comment about, you know, having to compete with the commercial operations, having to broaden what you're doing. How much are you actually looking at not just cutting costs, which often means cutting services, but sort of broadening maybe the breadth of what the ABC does so that you can bring in some revenue?
You're not suggesting we take advertisements, are you?
No, I'm not.
Because we never will.
No, and I think
we never will.
You'd lose the people if you did. But what I suppose it's a challenge for the women in your organisation to start looking at some of these things differently, you know, about how you might be able to...
There isn't anything we're not looking at differently.
Good.
From combining with other organisations for Telstra bills. I'm even wondering whether you need a landline at all, quite frankly. I don't know about yours. I've got one in my office and I think I've used it twice in 9 months. You think, be bit obsolete. I'm not sure I need you anymore. So we're having a look at that. There's all sorts of collaborative ideas that we're looking at. And I do think collaboration for all of us in the media, is probably the way forward. I was reading a paper done by one of our staff who last year won a Donald McDonald Scholarship to the Reuters Institute of Journalism in the UK at Oxford. And she's written a very interesting paper about collaborative measures that have been underway in the UK, where some news organisations are banding together to go to country areas of the UK and then pooling some of the stories that they've been looking at, specifically at local councils, which if you've ever done journalism rounds, we've probably all been there if you've been when you're a young journalist, there's always lots of stories in local councils. They don't always get into the public arena because there's no one covering them. However, this collaborative effort in the UK has uncovered several great stories that have made page one on Fleet Street newspapers in London. And so we're looking at something similar here. You know, is there a possibility for us to do that here? So there's a lot of things underway that we're reviewing at the moment. So it's not just cost cutting, it's also how do we look at the future and how do we change the way we're doing things?
So we only have a few more minutes left. Let me ask the highest voted question at the moment. The Washington Post banner notes that democracy dies in the darkness, and I think certainly that echoes some of the things you've been saying too. Given its crucial role in a healthy democracy, how can the media withstand results, particularly from populist political figures?
By combining together like we all have, and by mounting the campaign that we've begun and that we will continue until we get a satisfactory outcome. You know, that's the way it is. I mean, you may have seen that on the ABC we've got what we call a corporate announcement, where we've outlined stories that we have broken that you would not have known about had the ABC not published them, and there's a little statement by me at the end of it. The commercial networks are doing their own campaign, which is too political for us because we can't, by our charter rules, be political to that extent. But the newspapers did all come out nationally with their newspaper, with the newspapers blacked out. I mean, these are very strong comments by media, and this is not just a few of us, this is the entire media organisation, all media organisations in Australia. This is a very strong protest from Australian media. So it's not going away. We feel very strongly about this. We feel very strongly about the public's right to know. There cannot be a deterrent to that happening.
And one final question, without going into the details of strategies that haven't yet been released, of course. If we think forward 10 years from now, what stays the same about the ABC? What endures? And what do you think at a high level we might see in this very disrupted time being disrupted and changed?
Well, I'll just get the crystal ball. I don't know where we'll be in 10 years. I think most of the services will be digital. You know, we know that broadcast TV, the traditional way of broadcasting is slowly losing audiences. The commercials are losing audience more rapidly than we are, but nonetheless there is a significant drop-off. So because you have to be all things to all people, the ABC will maintain those services until such times as they become completely unrequired, unnecessary. So I think we can see the way forward is digital. That's what everybody's looking for. They want to be able to go and look at things. They want to binge watch programs. So I think that will change the way we work considerably. But it will open a new way of doing things that I can't even envisage because technology is moving so fast that I could say to you, look what we can do now. But in 1 year, it will be very different. And in 10 years' time, it will be somewhere we can't even possibly envisage at this point in time. I'd have to go and sit in a room with a sort of a Google guru and say, what do you see happening? For me to be able to give you a better idea. You just know that the change that we're experiencing is going to continue and that digital seems to be the way forward as we understand everything at this point in time.
Well, I very much hope in 10 years Bluey is still going because not only is it a great show with international outreach, but the guys behind it are Griffith alumni.
Yeah.
And one of the characters is based on an archaeologist at Griffith. So what more can you hope for? Thank you for your great generosity with those questions. Could I now call on Clint to close proceedings for us?
Thank you, everybody.